I'm Steve Wiggins, and this is the Groundworks Ministries podcast. Today we're reading from the book of Matthew, chapter 17. Let's focus on verses 24 through 27. And when they had come to Capernaum, those who collected the double drachma tax approached Peter and said, "Doesn't your teacher pay the double drachma tax?" "Yes," he said. And then he went into the house, and Jesus spoke to him first. "What do you think, Simon?" He must have been hearing him talking outdoors. "Who do earthly kings collect tariffs and taxes from? From their sons or from strangers?" "Well, from strangers," he said. "Well, then the sons are free," Jesus told him. "But so we don't offend them, go to the sea, cast in a fish hook." Well, Peter knew how to do that. He's a fisherman. "And catch the first fish that comes up. And when you open its mouth, you'll find a coin. And take it and give it to them for me and for you." A double drachma is not a wrestling move. He's got him in a double drachma. No. It was a tax that was established actually in Exodus chapter 30. And the tax's original purpose was to atone for mortal sin, that is, the killing of an Israelite soldier that he might participate in during battle. So the tax was utterly unnecessary. Why? Well, number one, because Israel doesn't have an army, right? They had the Roman army. And it was even more unnecessary that the Messiah, that Jesus, would have to pay the tax. After all, he was the one who would atone for all sin. I'm the atonement. I don't have to atone for myself. So no one would be guilty before God. So why the tax? Why was it taxed? And why did Jesus pay it? Well, King Herod levied the tax because he had greatly expanded the temple complex in his day. He actually was a visionary and quite an architect. Part of his expansion included building a big marketplace, and it is suggested that Herod reimposed the double drachma tax because it was rooted in biblical history. So it's like, hey, this is an old tax, we're bringing it back. But it was mostly implemented to pressure the public in order to pay for his construction projects at the temple. And Jesus wouldn't have sinned by ignoring the tax because, hey, this is my Father's house, and yet he paid it. And the temple, like I say, is his Father's house. He detested Herod's renovations to his Father's house. He articulates that later in Scripture. Herod's expansions were designed to extort worshipers. So Jesus had all the rationale to not pay it. But now Jesus, God's own Son, being asked to pay for unwanted additions to his Father's house, he has plans to take a whip and to clear Herod's merchants from the temple complex, but that's going to be another day. Jesus still had ministry to do around Galilee. So paying the tax was not a sin, and it was a testimony to the Herodians and also to the Romans that Jesus wasn't planning a revolt against the government. I'm paying my taxes. Jesus chose his battles wisely, and he was winning souls as well as saving them. And that's a lesson for all of us. Keep the main thing the main thing. By asking Jesus and Peter to pay the double drachma, the tax collectors proved that they didn't believe that Jesus was the Messiah, and they treated the Messiah as if he were a common stranger in God's house instead of its inheritor. And finally, we observed Jesus and Peter didn't have any money. Not a lot like some of these megachurch or some of these big TV preachers. Jesus and Peter didn't have any money, at least they didn't have any that was readily available. And perhaps Jesus was also showing Peter that the apostles' needs would eventually be met by the Lord through a byproduct of evangelism, which was offerings. You know, fish in the Bible and biblical imagery symbolize evangelism. Jesus says, "Follow me, I'll make you fishers of men." And when there is a growing number of disciples, well, then the resources for ministry increase through tithes and offerings. And this support system, which begins with evangelism, is observed in Acts chapter 2, where the early church committed all that they owned to the apostles to supply all the needs that were there for not only the apostles' needs, but also for the needs of the community. They literally laid their belongings at the apostles' feet, and had all things in common. You know, even today, ministry is still supported in this manner through the generous support of kingdom-minded believers. I'm Steve Wiggins, and this is the Groundworks Ministries podcast. Groundworks Ministries operates entirely through financial donations from faithful people like you. And your giving to Groundworks Ministries helps transform lives. Would you consider making a donation to Groundworks Ministries today? Because we need your monthly support now more than ever. Donating is secure and it's easy at our website, groundworksministries.com. You know, another way to help is to tell people about Groundworks Ministries. Share these podcasts with friends and family and on your social media. And of course, you can always direct folks back to our website, groundworksministries.com.